Hi everyone and welcome for this brand new tutorial on the project Heroquest. So this time we are going to focus on the first set of scenery. I decided to cut in 3 parts all the different elements to paint all the different scenery. This first part is going to focus on the wood and the non-metallic metal part. The second part will be about this, everything is about some stone and everything else, and the last one will be about the special effect. I do that because it will be more simple for me to show you, and for example when I talk about the wood, you can apply that on all the wood parts of your scenery. So that's more easy for me and more understandable for you. So I really hope you enjoy. The next one will be on the second batch of scenery, the next tutorial, and the next one will be on the last batch of scenery, and we will start after that the characters of this board game. So what next? I think that's all. So don't hesitate to support me on Patreon if you like this kind of content, and to like the video and to post a comment if you have any kind of feedback to give to my content. So thanks again for watching and see you soon, guys. Let's go for the paint. So for this tutorial I'm going to show you some different way to paint the different scenery, and for that I'm going to use different kind of ink to create different kind of wood metallic parts. Sometimes it's going to be some gold metallic parts, and some other time that's going to be some classical metallic parts in gray, or gray a little bit blue, something like that. So you are going to see some different way to paint all these different scenery. So I'm going to apply some hardened laser to have a pretty dark wood, for example, and I'm going to use once again my metallic palettes, just to be sure the paint is not going to be dried too quickly. That's what's happened when you use some paper palette. That's going to be more dry and really more quickly. As you can see, I use a large brush just to be sure to reach the more large surfaces I can in the low step I can, to make it more easily and more quickly. We are going to try to make that in one way, to be sure to have this paint everywhere, and to be sure the surfaces will be clean and without any different surfaces, different color when you apply. So I'm going to show you on this part for the wood, but for example, I'm not necessarily going to show you all the different parts in wood. You just have to apply this same methods every time you see some wood on your scenery. So as you can see, you can always change, and for example right here, these parts I'm going to use some dark wood in place of the hardened laser, just to have more dark wood. So it's less red, but that's going to be sometimes helpful for 2 different reasons: for your motivation, because you are going to paint with some different kind of color, and for the gameplay, that's going to be sometimes helpful just to make some distinction between your different stuff on the board, the different scenery, and that can be pretty cool. So I do that on that step, but you can do that on all the different scenery. Just change your mind by change the color of your wood. So I'm going to continue the chests, and for that I'm going to use different kind of paint to create different kind of non-metallic metal. Something very simple, for example some zealot yellow on this one to create some gold non-metallic metal, some runic gray and some gravel gray, so on the two different other, just to have different kind of non-metallic metal. So now I apply some runic gray, and it's always a good thing to have some different kind of scenery on the board, and that's going to create more life, to have some few kind of different color on the different scenery. And now I come back with some Gravelord Grey to have a more dark non-metallic metal on this part. So I really enjoy painting this kind of surfaces with non-metallic metal, because I think the paint with some metallic pigment is sometimes more difficult to apply. So that's a good way to base your color, and you can always come back later with metallic color directly and pushing your highlight with your metallic color. That's work in the same way than for the non-metallic metal. You just have to apply it on the different edges, and that's going to give more life and more light on your different part. So now I apply some blue red. I'm going to do that kind of things on all the different scenery to have a level 1 ready to play. And after I'm going to do the same for the book into the library. just to have different color on the different book. And for that I'm just going to change my brush because it's a little bit too large, and I'm going to apply different kind of color on the different book I have in the library. As you can see, on every book I'm going to apply some different color, just like that, just to create more life into the scenery. And remember, I always try to apply first my darkest color and after my more lightful color, so it's going to be more easy, and if I do some mistake, it's going to be really less visible on the mini. Try always to have, for example, 3 book or 5 book, but that's going to be more natural to have something not necessarily symmetrical. So we can use some blue, some magic blue for example. So we are going now to pushing our lights on the wood, and for that I'm going to do some few dry brush with some Artist Opus special dry brush series, and for that I'm going to use this one and a smaller one for the very small surfaces. So I'm going to use at beginning oddly some snakebit laser, and after that I'm going to use some mix between snakebit laser and some few white. This method is perfectly okay when you have a lot of contrast into the sculpts, but if you have not enough contrast, so you need to change your method for something more complicated, just by pushing more highlight on every line. But for that's worked pretty well. You can always do that with a more classical and a regular brush, and in this case you need to come in parallel of the surfaces just to apply just some few on the more strong volume of your minis. And after I'm going to do the same by adding some few white into my mix. I remove a lot of my paint and I'm going to make again a few dry brush on the up part. You can make 1, 2, 3 or more layer of this step. By reducing your surfaces, you are going to create more and more volume and contrasts on the chest. So as you can see, I'm going to use on the dark wood some Dumbleborn to have more highlight on my very dark wood. The same way, we are going to reduce step by step the surfaces we are going to reach to create our highlight. Remember, I'm going to show you on this chest, but I'm going to apply the same step on all the different scenery with some wood, and depending on the color of your wood, you can make one or the other receipt. And now I'm going to add some few of the two different color I already use to create one more highlight. Once again, I reduce the surface I reach to create some strong highlights who come from the up of the miniatures. So now I am going to come back on all the gray surfaces, and with some few white I'm going to push my highlight on every edges to create my non-metallic metal effect. As you can see, I use a lot the side of my brush to push my highlight on every edges. So I'm not going to show you that on every of the bundle of scenery I paint right now, but it's always same things about this. It's about pushing your highlight on every edges. And remember to push if that's not in one time. Don't hesitate to push again and again. And in, for example, 3 layers, you will have an enough strong white on your edges. Just a reminder for all my boss on Patreon, you have access to a video about the quantity of paint into your brush and the dilution you need. So that will be pretty cool to see again this tutorial to have a better understood of the different steps I show you right now. So I'm going to continue like that, and I'm going to stop when I see the white color pretty clearly on the different light part. So to do the gold in non-metallic metal, we are going to come with some yellow gold from Prince August, and after that I'm going to come back with some few white to pushing again my highlight. So this same step is going to be applied on all the gold of the different scenery. So I'm going to gain some times to don't change every time my different color, and use a lot this one on all the different scenery. I decided to paint not necessarily all scenery in one step, but I separate all the scenery were composed with wood and some part in metal, just to have in the other way some tutorial about how to paint some stone and all the different special effects we can see on this on the scenery who compose the Heroquest box. For this level 2, I always try to have something with more contrast, with more light. I don't try to have something perfect, but something will be perfect to continue painting by adding more contrast or more different kind of effect on the miniatures. Remember to push your every edge needs to have a pretty strong highlight. That's really important. And now I'm going to add more white on the same edges and some point of highlight. This kind of scenery is pretty cool because it gives more immersion. You are more into the game by adding this kind of elements. This 3D scenery is yeah, a must-have for me. And the quality of plastic is not necessarily the best, but for me it's enough for scenery and things like that. Probably not enough for miniatures in my mind, but in my opinion, but for scenery that's worked pretty well. So we can come back with some black and pushing our shadow and into the recesses to pushing more contrasts into this paint. By the way, after you apply some black, it's always better to come back and once again pushing a little bit more white to be sure your contrast will be strong and the white will be the last color you put, so it's going to be a more strong color. By the way, you can always use the black very diluted to push into the back part of the wood, just to pushing more contrast. For example, it's the same for the non-metallic metal in gray. We can come back and pushing more shadow. So every time we need to finish with some point of white, that's always welcome to have very strong contrast and very strong light to show how the reflection of light is strong on some metallic. So now, after that, I'm going to make some treatments on all the special case like this chair, and in that case I already do the wood, so that's okay. I apply exactly the same step than for this chest on the wood, and I'm going to apply some highlights just on the red with some corn red and Evilson's red. Corn red for the shadow and Evilson's red for the highlight. So for this step we make something pretty easy. We just clean the surfaces where the ink, the speed paint was a little bit too strong. It's like a dry brush, but with a not necessarily totally dry brush. So you just have to push your color in the good direction. On this kind of surfaces, the plastic is not necessarily very clean, and on this kind of surfaces, speed paint have not necessarily a perfect reaction. So that's give us the opportunity to clean that. So I come back on the book with exactly same step. So I push some Evilson's red on the up of the book and some corn red on the down of the book. That's all. After I'm going to do exactly the same, but this time with some green and with some brown. So for the brown, it's just for the brown book. So I use some flat earth from Prince August. And if you have more time, you can always have different kind of color on this book, depending on the time you want to spend into the paint of this part. That can work too. And now I just add more white into my brown, just to push just a few more highlight on some few part. And if there are just some paper, you can push with this. So I can push my highlights on the skulls into the scenery, by the way. We can make the same for the blue, the same for the green, and that will be okay for that. And that will be the last step for the second level for this scenery. So I come back with some blue. This is airbrush color, but that's worked pretty well with my brush, by the way, Unique Blue. It's a less covering color, but that worked pretty well to push your different highlight. So I really like the green from Games Workshop because it's pretty covering and pretty easy. So I use this one because it's a more neutral green, and then apply with a pretty diluted color. And now I just come back by adding just a few white and pushing on the edges, just to have some few highlight. So I just push a little bit white, and it's going to be okay for this scenery in level 2. Let's go for the level up, and now for the level 3 we are going to use a lot of airbrush and some few shade in some very small surfaces to create and to give more life to our element and to all our scenery. So I'm going to use some sienna color from Pro Color. I really enjoy this color just because it's going to be very fluid, and it's going to let my airbrush very clean during a long time. And now I'm going to pushing more shadow into the wood. I use this color because the wood is pretty clear, but for the next wood, for the more dark wood, we are going to use directly some black, just to pushing more shadow into the wood who are going to be more dark. So I just come back on this chest with some sienna again, but only on the non-metallic metal part, just to have more strong shadow into my non-metallic metal. So I'm going to continue, but this time with some matte black from Army Painter hair color, and I'm going to apply my strong shadow on every different scenery to have a more strong and more volume on my different scenery. You can see that's going to clean up a little bit my different surfaces and my transition between my different color, and that's perfect to mix between that and some dry brush, because it's going to clean the different surfaces. So the paint is pretty liquid, so we are going to, when we apply with our airbrush, we are going to see that's going to be to go into the recesses and giving more deep effect to our paint. So that's always welcome. So I come back with some desert yellow from Army Painter hair to push a little bit more highlight on some few and small surfaces. As you can see, it's going to create some layer of light, and it's going to give more volume at the end. So I'm going to apply the same light with the same color, but not necessarily as strong as the first color, just because I want to have some wood more dark always than the first one, just to create some distinction between my different elements. As you can see, that's pretty quick, and you need to focus. You don't stay too long on small surfaces, but always move on and change the surface you are going to reach at every step. So I come back on the share, and this time only on the red part. So I'm just going to push some few reds on the share, just to clean my surfaces of red and have something more strong and more clean. So with some few black color, I'm going to come and pushing some distinction between the different elements. For example, right here I come back with some black all around the red, and on this part I come back and I make some few points of black just to create my non-metallic metal aspect into that surfaces. So with my black, I'm going to come back, but by the way, I will come back on the wood in the same way, just to pushing a little bit more shadow into the more strong recesses, and that's going to pushing more contrast into the wood. So as you can see, with my black very diluted, I come and pushing some juice of black into the more strong recesses, just to create once again more and more contrast and giving more volume to all the different scenery. And that I do that on the chest, but it's you can do that on every kind of and type of scenery. That's always welcome to give more life. So I come back with some skeleton horde on all the wood part, and I'm going to focus this last highlight on the wood, just on the part we're going to keep and to take the more light. So remember to reduce step by step the surfaces you are going to reach, to have something with a light with a very strong direction. So I come back with my white and my non-metallic parts, just to pushing one more time my highlight, and by the way, reduce the different surfaces I reach by mistake when I use my airbrush. So it's going to push again more light and make some correction about the surfaces I reach with my airbrush. So now I come back on all the red parts. I'm going to show you that on the share, but I'm going to make the same on the book on the library. And I'm going just for the moment apply some Evil Sense red to be sure my surfaces will be the more clean I can. Remember that's the level 3 of this paint, so the objective is just to have something better than the level 2 for sure, and something with more strong light and something more alive. Remember, the red is not a very covering color, and if you want to have nice transition, you just have to reduce step by step the surfaces you are going to reach, so the red will be more and more intense on a smaller and smaller surfaces, and that's going to create a very nice transition. So for my second highlight, I'm just going to push some few points of Trolls Layer orange to push a little bit more highlights, and after I will add just a few white into this Trolls Layer orange for my last highlight on the red. Remember to reduce step by step more and more the surfaces you are going to reach to create your transition. So I just had a few points of white into my orange and come back just to tap my last few points of highlight. Not everywhere, once again, just on some few surfaces to create my contrast. So now with some dark angel green and very diluted, I'm going to apply some few layers on some different parts, not necessarily everywhere, but just on some few part of wood to create some asymmetrical effect and to have something with more life inside. Remember, I'm not going to apply everywhere, and I'm going to make some few layer of color, and after, when it will be totally dry, I can come back and make it again on some of them, of some of the surfaces, just to be sure the color will be more strong. And that will be the last step for this scenery. The next one will be about probably the scenery, but this time in stone, and probably a last one will appear just with the scenery will have some special effects, like some other source lightning or something like that. So here is the result for this first batch of scenery. I really hope you enjoy. The next one will be about the scenery with more stone, and I really hope you are going to enjoy this one too. Don't hesitate to subscribe to the channel, and post a comment if you have any kind of question or recommendation. And you can always support me on Patreon if you like the kind of content I propose to you. Thanks again for watching, and see you very soon for the next tutorial. Bye bye!